Hi everybody, it's Christopher Nejman, and today's project is going to be a beach tote bag made from a rag rug. This rag rug I've had for years, and I bought this to make this project many years ago. And it got stuck in the drawer. I never did make it, and I thought, wow, you know, there's a lot of you that want to know about making bags. So I thought, what a perfect project for beginners is to show them how to make a beach tote out of a rag rug. So we're going to go from this to this and have some fun doing it. So stay with me and I'll be right back. Alright, welcome back everybody. So to make this beach tote from a rag rug, I just found supplies that I had laying around. If you're a newbie and new beginner, chances are you don't have any supplies and anything yet. So you'll want to go to the store and buy some supplies. For example, you're going to need 4 sliders. Now these sliders, this is what they look like. They are used for belt. Put them in belts. I need 4 of them. And these are 2-inch ones I have because I do have 2-inch webbing that I'm going to use, and this 2-inch webbing is going to be used for the straps. Okay, and as we make this bag, I'll measure everything out for you so you know what I'm using, but this can be for any size. So basically what I'm teaching you is how to put it together, but you can make it any size you want. Even your rug can be any size that you want it to be. And then you're also going to need a clasp, a hook clasp, swivel one. Okay, you're going to need a D-ring, and for this is a 1-inch, so I also have 1-inch webbing that I'm going to use. Alright, so let's begin this project. Now, years ago when I got this and I wanted to start this project, which I never did finish, this is one we call a UFO, this had fringe on the edge, so I cut the fringe off and then I serged it. Now what I want to do is I want to skim the edges of this rag rug and serge the edges here so they're nice and smooth and ready to go for lining up when I go to sew. So let's get this started here. I got my stitch length on 3.5. It's a 4-thread overlock. If you don't have a serger, you could do a wide zigzag on the edge. That's after you slice off the edge. Just trim the edge with a ruler right here. Take off those little bumps there and then do a zigzag on the edge if you don't have a serger. But most all your machines have a serger stitch built in, so just trim the edge off and then use a long length serger stitch on your machine, and just to give that an edge finish. Because I have a serger, I'm using the serger and it automatically cuts the edge off for me. Let me show you what I mean. See, it's cleaning the edge up for me. So I have a nice edge there. See, that's what I'm talking about. You want to do that on both sides. Actually, you want to do this on all 4 sides once you cut the fringe off, if your rug has any fringe like I did many years ago here. So I'm just skimming the edge. And I wasn't skimming enough here, I wasn't close enough. But that'll be okay. I was looking at the camera and I looked away and I moved this away from the edge of the machine, and that's what happens. So if this ever happens to you, it's because you don't have this close enough to the blade, okay? But this is good. This is good, it's just a little bit there. That's what happens when I'm trying to watch the camera as I'm sewing. Alright, let's do the other side now. And it helps to have a flatbed surface on the side, and I did that in my video. On my left side is a table that lines up with my serger, so I can lay this big rug on there, and it glides real nice for me. There we go. All done. See? See how nice I cleaned it up? Alright, let's move on to the next step. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to line up the sides, match the top, line up the sides. I'm going to use some heavy duty clips here. These are paper clips from the office supply store. Put a couple of these on going down. And just stay a little bit away from the bottom because we're going to be cutting the bottom. Let me make a gusset. What inspired you to want to learn how to sew? Why don't you comment below this video and tell me what inspired you to want to learn how to sew? I'd be really curious. You know what inspired me to learn how to sew? When I bought my first house in Florida, I needed decorating. Picked up a sewing machine to learn, and then I went to my first Star Trek convention. I needed a costume, so I had to learn how to make a costume. All right, here we go. So now this is the folded edge down here. Let me move this up. This is a folded edge down here. Let me get my ruler. What I want to do is I want to do a 3-inch square. Okay, I'm going to do a 3-inch square. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up the 3-inch here, line up a 3-inch there. I'm taking a magic marker. You may not want to do a magic marker. You may want to do a chalk. Do the magic marker so you can see. So there's a 3-inch square there. Okay, and over here I'm going to do a 3-inch square. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to cut this square out. And then I'm going to go and stay stitch around it. It'll make sense to you when I do it. So first I'm going to cut this out. Alright, then after I cut that, I'm going to take my clamps off. I'm going to open this up. Alright, and there is the full gusset that's cut out. Okay, so you can see it up here. It'll look like a big old U, kind of like a U, kind of like an underdog. Now I'm going to stay stitch that. The excess there. Okay, there it is. Alright. And you do the same thing on the other side. Now, if you have a serger or a zigzag machine, you can stay stitch it by serging it, which I'm going to do now, or you can do a zigzag over the edge. Okay? Now these rugs tend to fray, and that's why you have to do this. So you want to do that on both sides. And then, as you can see, that's what it looks like when you serge it. Okay? So let me do the other side as well. You just want to skim the edge, that's all you want to do. And you want your serger to be as wide as possible. Your serger stitch, that is. Alright, so there that is. Okay, this isn't perfection. Oh, let me fix that. I don't like that. I was just going to say, this isn't perfection, but here I am wanting to fix that. Alright, there we go. That's good enough. Alright, so there's your serged. Okay. Alright, let's move on. Okay, so here is the tote bag opened up. And what we want to do is I want to reinforce the bottom here because this is going to be sitting on a lot of stuff, right? So I want to put a piece of vinyl here. So if I take my 6-inch wide ruler, wow. It's like so perfect almost. It's like almost so perfect here. So I got 14 inches wide. I'm sorry, 6 inches wide by 14 inches long. Now I'm going to cut a piece of vinyl out, and I also want to fold over a 1/2 inch on each side. So what I'm going to need is I'm going to need a 7-inch wide by 14. So let me cut that and I'll show you how we're going to do that next. Alright, so now I cut my vinyl out, and as you can see, it's beautiful. So now I've got to fold over the edges. Now, I'm going to use double-sided tape. If you do not have double-sided tape, you don't have to cut the extra 1/2 inch. You can leave it raw on the edge like that. Just make it a 1/2 inch shorter on each end, which would make it 1 inch shorter when you cut the width. Okay, so on this side I drew a 1 inch width because when you fold that over it's going to be just like that. Okay, let me show you here. When you fold this over you're going to match it right on that line and that tape is going to hold it. So let me put the tape down and show you. This is leather tape. You can find this anywhere they sell leather sewing supplies. Go. And I'm not going to do the ends here because oops, got a little bit there. I'm not going to do the ends here because these ends are going to be part of the seam allowance over here. Okay, so there's that. You peel this off and then you fold to the black line. Let me move this out of the way. And after all this, you can go to your mama's kitchen and get a rolling pin, or if you've already started buying supplies, you'll have a brayer. If you do arts and crafts supplies, you'll already have a brayer. So you want to flatten that down. There we go. And then we'll do the other side. So when it goes on here, and it goes on your bottom of your tote bag, you'll have a nice edge, you see? And then you'll tape that down to hold baste it in place, and then you're going to sew it there. So let me finish doing this, and then I'll go to the sewing machine and I'll sew this right here for you. Okay everybody, now we're going to do some sewing. So the vinyl here, I basted it in place. And I put the tape over I'd say about 2 inches over from where the edge was here, because you got to remember this seam I had tape there, and I don't want to double the tape up because this is this tape is so you can sew through it, but it's still you can still have some issues. All right, so now I rolled up the side here. I'm going to follow the edge of my foot for the guide on the edge of this vinyl. Okay, so we're going to start with the needle down, and then I'm going to do a back stitch. Then we're going to come forward. Try to keep that vinyl right on the edge of that foot. Remember, newbies, never look at the needle. Always follow a guide mark. And in this instance, the guide mark is the vinyl on the left edge of the foot. If you follow the needle, you're gonna sew too crooked. Always follow guide marks, seam allowances, seam guides. Okay, I get to the edge here. I'm going to back stitch. And this is going to be caught in the seam allowance anyway, so you know I really didn't have to back stitch, but I did. Alright, let's see what I got here. Let's see how I did. Pull this out. See how well I did. Let's look. Let's look and see how nice that stitch is. Beautiful stitch. Beautiful. That's a beautiful stitch. Look at that. Very nice. Now we're going to do the other side. So I'm going to roll this side up. So I can get this over here. There we go. Alright, so when you start, you want to start about 1/2 of an inch from the edge, because then it won't get hung up. And if it does get hung up, or if you think it will, you can put a Genamajig under here. And you guys can look up a Genamajig. I did talk about that in one of my other videos. Alright, so now I'm going to go stitch forward, needle down, a stitch forward, and then I'm going to go backwards. There you go. And now we're going to come forward. This is my old Janome MC9000 from the early 90s. Janome makes a damn good machine. The only problem is the computer boards for these machines, once they die, that's it. I've talked about this many times on all these brand computer sewing machines. Once the board, it's not just Janome, it was all Brother and everybody else. Once the motherboard goes and the screen dies, you're SOL. So all that money you spent on these machines. And that's why I always tell everybody it's just like a car. Never buy nothing brand new. Never pay full price for anything anymore, because technology gets outdated so quickly you just wasted your money. So, alright, let's check this one out. Beautiful. Yeah, I picked this machine up used. And you know, one of the things about our industry is there's a lot more older people who sew than younger people, and these older people buy these expensive sewing machines. I guess the theory for some of these older women is if their husband's going to buy a boat, or the husband's going to buy power tools, she's going to buy the most expensive sewing machine. And most of the time they don't really use it to sew. They'll do embroidery of this and that, but they really don't use it as much as they normally should if you're a real power sewer. So then every 4 or 5 years, the sewing machine companies come out with a new sewing machine, a new top-line sewing machine. So grandma is trading in her previous top-line sewing machine, where there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, to buy the new one. Or she sells it on eBay so she can buy her new one. Alright, the advantage to that is all the younger sewers can now get a discounted sewing machine. And if you wait a couple generations, you get a really discounted. Now, I think when this sewing machine came out, it was like around $2,400, and I got this used for $500. I got this used for $500. So you see the difference? So as long as these computer screens last you, you're going to have a long longevity to a sewing machine. All right, there you go. There you go. But I'm going to encourage all of you to have a backup. Have a backup vintage all mechanical machine, because they sew through anything and they don't need a computer board, and they've been alive longer than your great grandparents. But for fun and for shits and giggles, we love our computer machines. So isn't that a beautiful stitch? That's Janome makes a beautiful stitch, and there it is. This is the bottom. This is the bottom of your bag. Okay? All right, let's move on, guys. All right, now the next thing we want to do is you want to take your webbing, whatever size webbing that you purchased to match the size slider that you bought. You want to take it and measure from here to the bottom of that. You're going to cut 4 of these, 2 for one side, this side, and 2 for the other side. As soon as you cut it, get a lighter and seal the edge. This one's already been sealed, because webbing, as you know, webbing frays so easily. So that's one. Okay, let's do the other one. So I'm going to get the other one here, there, cut it right there, seal it. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to do 2 more for the other side. So I want to make sure that you saw this in the camera. I'm not sure, but you want to make sure that you get a lighter and you fray those, seal those edges, because like I said, the webbing will really fray on you. So make sure you seal those edges. And then the part that you cut off that's still attached to the bolt or the yardage, go ahead and seal that too so it doesn't fray on you. Okay? Okay, now we're going to go to the inside of the tote bag. And I like to use the grid lines on my measuring grid lines on my cutting mat. I find it really is helpful. So right now, I would like 1.5 inch seam allowance. So I'm folding this over. Here's 1, 2, fold it over to the 3, and that'll give me 1.5 inches. So if I mark that, use the ruler to measure that, it's 1.5 inches. And all I'm going to do is just hold this in place temporarily with a pin. And I'm putting the pins in horizontally. This is going to be an important step for the next step. Okay, and we'll do the same thing on the other side. Now, when I flip this over, you can see this is going to be the top. This is the outside, right? Now I want to figure out where my straps are going to go. So the cool thing about this fabric is it's all lined up. You got lines to follow here. So the strap is going to go here and let's see here. Measure the distance from the edge for each one. That's 2 inches there. More than 2 inches there. So you want to measure. It doesn't look like it's gonna line up very well for us. Even wise, that is. So that theory is out where you can follow these lines completely, but they can be pretty much a guideline. So if I measure this, it's 2.5 inches from the edge, and I'm going to do 2.5 inches from this edge. Okay. It's 2.5 and 2.5 in. Alright. Oh, looks like I didn't get this one. Look at that, I didn't. How did I miss that one? See how that frayed? Don't know how I missed that one, but I did. Alright, so now let's measure this again. 2.5 inches. Two and a half. Make sure this size 2.5, which it is. Okay, so now the cool thing though is you could pretty much follow this with the lines here. You pretty much follow it. Now if I wanted 2 inches from the side, maybe I want these straps to be further apart because you want to, excuse me, wearing this over your shoulder. So that's something you'll be able to customize for yourself. So let's set this to 2 inches wide. Let's set this to 2 inches wide. Does that look just a little too... See, that 1/2 inch made a big difference. That 1/2 inch made a big difference, so when you go to put your top strap on here, you're going to have more room. Alright, so now we have to figure out how we're going to put the straps on. So this is what we're going to do. Right here. So before I line it up to tack it down, I need to turn it over. I need to fold these over to the other side. So the bottom, I fold it up to 1 inch. So that's 1 inch. And then here, I folded it over to 1.5 inches. Now how did I determine 1.5 inches? Well, remember we got that seam allowance here, which is 1.5 inches here. Okay, so when I go to top stitch that, I don't want this being in the way. So you're going to have that there. I've got my slider on. Okay, the way you put the slider on, you put this on the bottom, fold it over 1.5 inches. Okay, so when I go to top stitch, I'll be able to avoid hitting this metal bar. And then my other strap that's going to be connected will be connected like this. When I have a long strap, I'll measure the distance I want, and then that'll be connected there. Then I'll come over here and connect to the other one, and then I'll be able to sew that down. So I can sew this down last. It doesn't have to be attached when I put this part down. Make sense to you guys? Alright. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this to all 4 sides, and then I'm going to measure 2 inches in from each end. I'm going to measure 2 inches from each end, and then I'm going to put a basting tape in the middle to hold this in place here. And then I'm going to sew around here, and I'm going to sew right across here, and across here, and across there where that this is. I'm going to use matching thread. Alright, I'm going to do it with all 4 sides, and I'll come back and show you. Okay, so I wanted to give you a couple tips when I sew. So I decided to do some sewing for you so you can watch me. This is my straight stitch machine. This is a semi-industrial machine. And what I've got is I've got a narrow foot. This is an industrial narrow foot machine. There you go. And you can get narrow feet for your basic sewing machine that you have. If you have a basic sewing machine, they're straight stitch feet, narrow straight stitch feet. If not, you can just do like I did on the Janome with the Teflon foot and just move the needle all the way to the left. Alright, so now that I've got everything basted in place, I'm going to start at the bottom. So it's starting at the bottom here. And like always, I use the edge of my foot as my seam guide. I'll just do one for you because this will be boring to you after a while. The video will be way too long. And remember, this rug is not, you don't have, see, it's so easy. It's like on a bias. The whole rug's on a bias. So it's easy to, everything can be warped out of place. So this will help give it some stability. This will definitely help give it some stability. Now here's a trick, just to be sure. There we go. Let's turn this over this way. Here we go. And bring it down all the way the other way. I could have gone one more stitch. One more stitch. There we go. Now, up here, we have that extra amount there, so I'm going to do a row right across here, right on that extra folded underneath amount. And then down here, the same thing. Now, if you're going to use matching thread, you got to be real careful. Now see, I match this down here, but when I do this, it stretches out. One thing I might have to do is I might have to take this in the black right here, which I'm going to do right now. I'm going to edge stitch this black down right on the edge there. Going to help reinforce that bottom. Because it's in black, it's not going to be highlighted like the white for top stitching. It's just there to help reinforce now. See, I help reinforce it some more. There we go. Alright, now I'm going to continue to do the rest, and then we'll move on from there. Alright, so now we're going to switch over to a domestic sewing machine. This is my Baby Lock S Spire. My stitch length, as you can see on the board, is 4.0. And we're going to be sewing with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now newbies, you need to know about sewing and following a seam guide. Alright? So This sticker I have on my machine, I bought this many years ago from my local sewing machine dealer. I think I found a couple online back then. I bought a couple dozen of them for all my machines, and a lot of people were written me and asked me where I got this, and I told them, I said, you know, I don't know anymore. You know, all I know is I got it from my local baby lock dealer when they were in business. That was my old dealer, and I think I bought a couple online, but I don't remember exactly where. But I can't tell you guys. You're gonna have to do a Google search. It's a stick-on sewing machine stick-on seam guide. Okay. All right. In the meantime, your machine, most machines you can get an adapter. This is a seam guide. It gets screwed into here, and then you mark where your seam allowance is going to be. So how do you determine where your seam allowance is? Well, most of the time you have marks on your plate here. If you don't, you get a seam guide ruler. Our needle's in the center needle position, so we're going to measure what a 1/2 inch is, and right there on my black line is where my 1/2 inch is. Now, if your machine doesn't accept one of these, you can always put a piece of masking tape on, and just make it level, you know, make it even when you put it down as your seam guide. Okay, you can do that, and then follow your fabric on the edge of that. I normally don't use a seam guide for this because it's really easy to see that, but for purposes today for newbies, I'm going to use this. And this is an accessory you can buy. I used to see these all the time long years ago, when I used to look at sewing machines, and I thought, what's that for? You know? And a lot of things you guys look at and say, what's that for? And some sewing machines came with this, you know, and it explained in your instruction manual what it was. All you had to do was open the manual. All right, so we're going to put that on, and then I'm just going to use a standard zigzag foot because we're just going over the cotton material. All right, let's get going and sew. All right, let's start sewing, guys. Now, the first tip I want to share with you, this is a tip that's shared in industrial sewing. A lot of home sewers, when they sew, they'll want to start sewing right away and come down here. Well, what happens is when you're sewing, the top, your presser foot, wants to push this fabric forward, and the feed dogs under here are pulling the fabric to the back. So what happens is you're going to end up with a shift, right? So here's the best way to prevent that. Line this up, put your fabric under, a good 1/2 inch, good 1/2 inch or so. Lower the needle, lower the foot, okay? There we go. The foot is lowered, and we're going to sew backwards. And then come forward. And if you have problems coming over that, lift the foot, use that black button, put it down, and then sew. Now, if your fabric is still having a hard time feeding, increase your stitch length to 5.0. Take your pins out as you go. Now, normally we don't use pins when we do sewing, for the majority of sewing. But this fabric is so wonky that for a newbie, I'm going to suggest you use pins. So make sure you've got your fabric even at the end. Go ahead, finish that up. Right at the end, back stitch, come forward, and cut. So there is our first seam. Now, if you want to put another seam in, If you want to put another row of stitching in, you can go ahead and stitch that down again. But when I turn this on the inside, you can see that's pretty strong. Okay, that's pretty strong. It's not going to go anywhere. Alright, so now we're going to do the other side the same way. I'm going to repeat what I just did. Line up your edges. Okay, line those edges up. Put your needle forward about a ½ inch from the top edge of the fabric. Lower the needle, lower the foot, go back, and then if you have that black button on your foot, press in the black button. I have several videos on how to use this black button. And then it just sews very flawlessly. See that? Alright. I'm going to continue to sew this down just like the first side. And you're butting the fabric against your seam guide. You're not looking at the needle. Don't look at the needle. You're looking at the side where your seam guide is. If you look at the needle, you're going to sew crooked. Just like when I'm doing videotaping, and sometimes I look at the camera monitor to make sure you can see me, and I take my eyes off the camera, and for that quick second, I wobble a little bit without realizing it, and then I get a crooked seam. Nancy Zeman used to tell a story when she was on television, when she would show you a project. For example, let's just say she's showing you this project when she's done with it, right? And she's, well, that's, you can't, that's too much in it. Well, let's just say this here, okay. Let's just say this is a seam or something she's showing you. She'll always put her thumb over where the mistake was to show you the good part. It saves time and production money from having to do it over on camera. Because when you're filming, you're always going to make a mistake. In real life, sometimes you make a lot of mistakes too, but don't let that stop you from sewing. Just, it's a learning experience. And here's the other thing too I want to tell you about. If you don't do something all the time and are not repetitive about it, you're not going to think and you're going to make a mistake. You're like, oh, I should have done it this way, especially with something new that you're doing. So don't be, don't be hard on yourself when you're doing something new and it doesn't come out right or something's wrong. It's because you haven't done it all the time. When you do something all the time and you know, and you're going to be perfect at it. So perfection comes from repetitiveness and from doing the same thing and learning. Okay? All right, so now that's all done. So what do we do next? Well, we're going to take these sides right here and we're going to match it. Line it up. Open this up. Open that seam up. Pin in place. And we're going to sew a ½ inch seam allowance all the way down here. What I suggest you do is, you can even do a ¼ inch, but because you have all these layers and this vinyl, you want to make sure you catch that vinyl well, do a ½ inch. Alright? So now I'm going to go needle down, I'm going to go back, come forward, and on a domestic sewing machine, your feeding system isn't like an industrial or semi-industrial, so you want to sew a little slow on this because you're going over a thick layer here. And for this bottom, I would definitely suggest sewing over this a couple times. Okay, so it's sewn. See, it's sewn nice. but I'm going to go over it again. There's that ski slope effect on the foot like I talked to you about before. Lift your foot, level that out, press the black button, and come on down. Reverse. And we will do the same thing on the other side. But if you want to check to see how it's done, how well it looks, turn your tote bag right side out and look at the bottom. Let's look at the bottom here. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Look at that. Look how nice that looks. You see? That looks really good. Get rid of this long piece of thread here. There we go. See that? Back this up now. There it is. Nice, right? You're going to do the same thing on the other side. Alright? And then I'll come back when it's done. Now, here's a trick I can share with you before I start the second side here. If you want to make sure that when you put this together that it's even, that it's centered on both sides, this is the way we cut it, right? You could put a mark here, or you can stick a pin here. The center, this is going to be the center, and then your other center is going to be where your seam is. So you take and you match the centers like that. Okay. Pin it in place. Or you can use clips. Now, if you're going to be using this and making something really, really nice and some really, really nice fabric, don't use pins here because this is vinyl. And if this is going to show on the other side, that you care about, don't use pins in the vinyl. This is just a beginner project, and it's something for you guys to learn. So I'm using pins. You can use pins, but if you have clips, you can use clips. But remember, if this is going to be something really, really good, don't use pins here because you don't want to put holes in the vinyl. All right, and then we're going to go and do the same sewing like the other side. Okay. Alright, next you need 2 pieces of webbing, and this is 1-inch webbing. We've got our swivel hook, which is a 1-inch opening here, and our D hook, which is a 1-inch wide opening. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our webbing on one, wrap it around the bottom of the D-ring, and what you want is you want to measure that about a 1 inch. Okay, you want to measure that about 1 inch. Bring that down. Yeah, that's good right there. Put a pin in to hold it in place. And then do the same thing on the other one. Yeah, perfect. Put a pin in. And then we're going to sew we're going to be sewing, boxing that in place. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to change my foot to a narrow foot. If you have a narrow foot or a zipper foot or any other type of foot like that, use a narrow foot from your machine. Check with your accessories too. Go to your dealer where you bought your sewing machine and see what accessory feet they have that you can buy for your machine. You know, if this is your first time ready to buy a sewing machine, I may suggest to you to be sure that you buy from a sewing machine dealer. A lot of you want to buy online, then you're lost. At a sewing machine dealer, you can get educated. You get very well educated on the machine, and they have accessories and they'll help you. So I would suggest that you go to a sewing machine dealer to buy your machines. And then after you become really educated at it and you understand all the presser feet and everything, then go ahead and, you know, if you find good deals on eBay or whatever to buy a machine, that's at your own risk. But I would go to a local sewing machine dealer first. And I'll tell you another reason why I'd go to them, because if anything ever happens to your machines, you would need a repairman. And if there's no local sewing machine dealer in business anymore, you are SOL. Do you know what that means? That means if your sewing machine breaks, you might have to ship it away somewhere and pay all that money for shipping. You know how expensive shipping is today? At your own expense? Because the sewing machine companies are not going to cover the cost of shipping if you need to ship it to them to get fixed. So be sure that you think about everything before you purchase a major purchase. So all I'm doing is making sure that I'm tacking this really well in place. And here's a little trick if you have problems going over. You sew backwards. And I'm going to do like an X here. You can sew this over a few times. Okay, now, backwards. Tack it, cut the thread, and there it is. And just clean up any excess thread that that might have got caught in there. See, you just want to make sure those are put into place. All right, let's go over to the next step. We're getting close to being done. Can you feel it? Are you getting excited? I know I am. This is your very first project, newbies. You've done a great job. You're going to have so much fun. You're going to want to make these for Christmas gifts. You might even want to make them and sell a few at the office. Make some money. Recoup your expenses so you can buy more notions. So you can buy more fabric. You can keep making more. You know? Never be afraid to charge for what you make. A lot of people are going to say, oh, you're sewing, can you do this, can you do that for me? And you know what? Tell them, yeah, and this is how much I charge, you know. Don't give the store away, because who's paying for your machine? Who's paying for your supplies? All right, here we go. So the next thing you want to do is you want to fold this over an inch. Now this is wrong side is out right now. Okay, the right side is in. Okay, and I'm folding over an inch, because that's going to be my seam. Now right here, what I want to do is I want to grade this seam about a half inch in and grade it. Okay? Then what we just sewed, we're going to sew this, put this here, tack this in place, because when this gets folded down, see what we're going to do is 1 inch down, 1 inch down, all the way around, and right at that fold line is where you want to butt that against there, and then fold this down. Now if it's too thick here for you, you can do it off to the side. You could put it off to the side instead of right on the seam. So let's just put it right off on the side of the seam right now. We'll do that for you all. But let's just make sure we pin this in place first. 1-inch seam. 1-inch seam all the way around. So I like to hear from you all, especially if you're watching this video on my YouTube channel. Why don't you comment below and tell me what was your first project, and let me know if you're going to try this project. You know, you go to the dollar store, this is a great way to practice. Find inexpensive materials to practice with. And then when you perfect something, then you buy the expensive materials. Then you buy the expensive materials and you make the really good stuff and sell it. Okay, see how I have that? See that? Now we're going to go to the other side. I'm going to grade this seam allowance here. And then I'm going to turn this over 1 inch. And see, I can eyeball 1 inch. After a while, you'll be able to eyeball things. Don't try it in the beginning. In the beginning, make sure you get your seam gauge. Make sure you get your seam gauge and measure, okay? Take your time. Measuring is your best friend. Using a seam guide on your sewing machine is your best friend. And remember, never ever watch the needle when you sew. You want to watch the edge of the fabric on the seam guide. Alright, so that's cool. So one is on one side, one is on the other side. Do we want it that way? Yeah, because that'd be kind of cool. They'll just compress on each end. So we'll do it like that. And you'll be able to figure out later on whether you like that or not, or what you want it both on both sides. Alright, so I'm pinning that in place. And make sure, like I said, that you've got this butted all the way up to that fold line. Now you're going to ask me again, well, Chris, how do I know what length to make this? Well, every bag is going to be a different width. What you want to do is, this is not right side. This has to be turned the other way. But when you go to clip this, this is going to bring your bag in from both sides. Let me just do this here. This is going to compress your bag in from both sides, and you have your straps. So it kind of closes the bag so nothing falls out. Okay, do you get it? You understand that now? Alright, so now what we're going to do is go to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew all the way around here. I'm going to do 2 lines of stitching. Alright, I'm going to do 2 lines of stitching all the way around, and then we're going to turn it right side out and measure our 2-inch strap, this one here, how long we want it. So what I suggest is you put this over your shoulder, bring it down to the bag, okay, and then add 1 inch to wrap around, and you're going to sew a box like I did with these right here. You sew the box to these right here. See that? And then you have your bag is complete. So let's go and sew this around right now. Okay, so now we're going to go back to my Janome domestic machine. My stitch length is 5.1, and my needle is moved all the way over to the left. Expose the free arm, and we're going to sew in the round. Okay? And then if you have a pressure dial on the top, because this is so thick, turn the dial to number 1. Okay? Some of you may not have a pressure dial, it's all automatic. A lot of these Janomes do, and if you do, just set it to number 1. Okay, let's go. And I'm going to go backwards just once. There we go. I want to set my machine so the needle stops in the needle down position. There we go. Never sew over pins, my friends. Never sew over pins. So this project will hide a whole lot of mistakes because of the rug. So if this is your first or second project, know that this is going to hold a lot of mistakes, and you're being kind of challenged right now because this is a thicker fabric. Now open up that seam under here where you folded it over. Open up that seam, okay? And then make sure that that webbing is caught in there so it doesn't come out. Alright, here we go. Now this is going to get thick here. See, that might happen. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to switch my foot. Okay? I'm going to switch the foot and I'm going to go to my black button foot. Alright, so if you guys encounter this kind of stuff, you're going to see how I'm showing you how to correct and get better results. Okay? Alright, so let me go there. Back stitch. Come forward. Okay, let's do the level the foot out. Level the foot out. Black button, engaged, down, sew over. Before I start sewing over here, let's make sure this is all, make sure this is up there. There we go. Ah, I moved the black button out of place. There, okay, let's do it again. That's really thick. That is really thick. So what am I going to do? Something's telling me that maybe I should move that needle to the right. So I'm going to move the needle to the right. Make it 2.0. Because maybe with that thickness it's hitting the edge of my plate. So let's just see. Oh, that's moving much better now. I'm not getting hung up. See? I'm not getting hung up now. Oh, but I am. That's pretty thick stuff. Alright, so that tells me that I'm just going to have to walk this by hand. Now, if you've got a machine like this and it's this thick and it's doing that, you need to walk it by hand when you go over these seams. So this is why I'm making this video for you guys, so you can see troubleshooting as well. So you will know what's up and what's not up. If I had a domestic, if I had an industrial sewing machine, this would go over with absolutely no problem. But I don't. I'm sewing on domestic because most of you are new sewers and you're going to be sewing on a domestic machine like this, a home sewing machine. So there you go. I walked over that with my, turn the wheel by hand on the side of the machine. Now we'll continue. So we'll resolve that little problem there. And I decided to go with this 1-inch seam allowance because I thought, yeah, 1 inch is, that's all we need is 1 inch. That's enough. So the whole purpose of this video is to demonstrate to you guys what happens, how to troubleshoot, how to accomplish, how to overcome problems. Remember, never sew over pins. Never ever sew over pins, guys. Never, 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 never. I'm going to open this up, make sure that seam Make sure that seam is opened. I probably could have graded this some more too. What happens if we grade that some more? Will it help with that seam? It most certainly will. So, let's grade this some more. Be careful not to go too close to your stitching line. Well, let's grade this a little more. And let's see if that's going to make a difference. So I'm opening that up. Wow, that feels like it's going to make a difference already. Look at that. Look at that. I think we might have a better chance here of sewing over it. But let's go slow, just in case. Problem resolved. You see that, guys? Problem resolved. And I'm coming up to where we started earlier. Just going over that again. With a back stitch. There we go. Now, let me lift the needle and let's move the needle position over to the right. So the width of this foot is 7.0 and I'm at 7.0 already, so let's just bring it down to a 6.0, and let's continue to sew. So this will be my double row stitching. Now remember, this one I didn't trim enough. This was the bulky seam right here. So we're going to have to walk this by hand when we get here. Bring that foot up, because this is really quite bulky. So I'm going to just walk it over. Yep, quite bulky, I can feel it. That would never. There we go. So lesson learned on that one, right? Lesson learned on that one, everybody. You gotta clean up those, thin out more of that seam allowance, okay? There we go. So take all these things into consideration when you're sewing. And this is part of troubleshooting. You're thinking like, what do I have to do? Now you saw the mistakes that were made, you saw the errors, and you saw the correction. So the next time I go and I'm going to make this rug, I'm going to grade more seam allowance. I didn't grade enough of a seam allowance when I did it the first time. And if you want to know the truth, this is the first time I've ever made a rag rug. I bought this years ago, as I told you, never made it. I use my domestic machines to make my leather bags. I'm sorry, I use my industrial machines to make my leather bags, and I use my domestic machines to make vinyl bags, and I use my industrial machines for vinyl bags as well. But this is the first time I've ever made a rag rug on a domestic machine. If I wasn't doing this for demonstrations for home sewers, I'd probably be doing this on my industrial machine. Whoa! Went too fast. You see that? Went too fast. Quite bulky, went too fast. Went way too fast. And I think possibly that I might need to change this needle. I think this needle might not be the right needle for this. But we're almost done, so I'm going to leave it. So let's just keep going slow. I am going to change the needle. I can feel something. I think the tip of it. Yeah, I think I will change this needle. I'm going to go back to a jeans needle. I'm going to go back to my jeans needle that I used earlier. Because I had a leather needle in here. And I think We'll just put the jeans needle back in. On some of these machines, the hardest thing is getting the needle. Now make sure you push the needle up all the way and tighten the side of that screw really tight by hand. If you're not strong, you can take a screwdriver and just make it snug. Okay, just make it snug. And this thread is a little thick, so I'm just gonna thread it by one more. Sometimes when you have too thick of threads, you can't really use the needle threader because the thread's too big. There we go. Alright, so I have a size 18 needle in here, and it's a jeans needle. Jeans needle. Okay, alright. Let's go where I picked up. We'll just do it again here. A little back stitch. So you're always going to find situations on a new project, but with the new project you need to learn from experience how to troubleshoot. Now I'm getting over this thickness here. I think I'm just going to engage the black button here. Yep. I'm so used to sewing fast on my industrial machines, I keep forgetting on the domestic machines you gotta slow down when you're going over thicker fabrics. But, lessons learned. You see, even me going back and forth. And one of the reasons why I'm shooting these videos is to show you guys how to troubleshoot. Okay, I'm coming up over this bulky seam allowance. Okay, I'm going to level my foot out. And I'm going to walk this by hand. So far, so good. Now, last time, the needle got hung up there. So now I'm using the jeans needle and I'm having perfect results. All right, a little back stitching here. Take it out. Clean up some threads here. And let's turn this right side out now. So by me showing you these mistakes, what I want you to know is don't ever give up. Always learn to troubleshoot. Think in your head, what could it be? What could it be? And you saw just recently how I resolved some of these little problems here. All right. This looks really good. It looks really nice. It's looking nice. She looking nice. And then I will put the straps on. Originally I was going to make the seam allowance lower. This was going to be lower. But I said, you know, this is good enough. 1 inch is good enough. And see the inside now. On the inside, when you go to clasp it, it pulls it in more. So it kind of has a side pleat, like a side gusset. You got like a built-in gusset. See that? I'll show you more in the next video. The next scene, I'll show you more. Okay, let's move on. coming to the end of the project. It's getting exciting. I can't wait till it's done. I can't wait till it's done. Alright, so here's the inside, and I shortened the straps here. Okay, I shortened them because they were a little too long and I wanted this tighter. So you can always cut and re-sew. No problem with that. This is why you sew, for adjusting. Now, here's the outside. Okay, I took the straps and I made sure that I laid it out to see what I wanted. Okay, for the width, or the length, that is, for the length. Then I put it through and I've got a 2-inch, I folded it back 2 inches. I'm going to sew these on like I did before. Now here's something else. Because this is so wide, it could, you know, a lot of gals don't have very wide shoulders. That's why Joan Crawford wore shoulder pads. Alright, so in the Dynasty era. So I'm going to find the center, and then after I find the center, grab a pin here. Okay. After I find the center, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold that in half. Okay? And then you're going to measure, let's just say, measure 3 inches on each side, 3 or 4 inches on each side, like that. And then stitch that along the edge there. Okay? And then once you stitch that along the edge there, this will be able to lay flatter on your shoulder and won't be so wide. And you can do that on both sides. Okay? And then you're going to have yourself your nice tote bag. Your beach tote bag. And there's the bottom. Look at that nice waterproof bottom. And some of you may want to put something on the bottom, but I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't put anything on the bottom. This is just fine. So there it is. You don't have to worry about trimming these seam allowances. Everything here is forgiving. That's why I chose this project for you. Everybody, I had emails from on my private website saying, hey, I'm a beginner. Will you show us a beginner project? You know, you're really good at bags. How come you never do a bag project? I'm like, well, I don't do a bag project because I'm not ready to share all those things yet. There's just so much involved because I do a lot of leather and stuff. But I said, you know what? There's a lot of newbies that came into sewing since the pandemic. So let me figure out something. And I said, okay, so here's the project I figured out for you guys. And it's going to look good. So let's check out that beauty shot one more time. And then after this is all done, and then you're going to have a nice bag. So enjoy this project. I hope you have fun making it. It is so well worth it. And take your time, learn. Remember troubleshooting. Don't get frustrated. And that's another reason why I did this video with all this, was every time there was a mistake, you guys saw the mistake and how I corrected it, how I thought, how can I make it better? For instance, the bulky seam. You know, you go and get rid of the bulky seam. Now this seam, this is the thinner seam. This was the bulkier seam. You can see a little bit of difference. See how much flatter that is and how much little bulkier that is? It's not all that great. I mean, it's not that thick, but for the domestic machine it is. For the industrial machine it wouldn't be. Okay, so, but that doesn't mean we can't sew this on the domestic machine. We just need to thin it out. And then I showed you there how we thinned it out. So there you go. Alright? Alright, so let me finish this up and I'll show you the whole finished project for a nice finished bag. Alright, so just to show you the straps, they're all sewn on. Did the box. They look really, really great. And now I'm going to do the strap fold. It's going to be 10 inches from the center, 5 inches each side, fold it in half. I'm going to sew it down. This is exactly what I've got going on right now. So let me start this for you. The pin is the beginning. And you want to make sure that it's even when you sew this. I'm going to take the pin out, lower the foot or the needle, back stitch a second, come forward, back stitch some more. There we go. I'm using a narrow foot on this machine. You know, trust me guys, when you start getting into sewing, you'll be collecting sewing machines and you'll have all your sewing machines set up to do something different. And that's what you're noticing in my video, is I've sewed on different sewing machines here because they're all set up to do something different. And when you make production, when you're in production, make in business for yourself, the last thing you want to do is to keep changing threads or changing this on one machine. But in the beginning, you're going to have to just do it. But as you progress and invest in more sewing machines, you'll be able to just go from one machine to the other. All right, so now those straps are done, and then now we're going to get the beauty shot for sure and show you how it looks. And here is the finished result. I'm excited for you guys to try it, for all the newbies. So the veterans, if any veterans were watching this, you might have picked up a tip or two, but this was dedicated towards the newbies so they could understand how to troubleshoot along the way, how to create something fun. And these are the straps. These are long enough to go over the shoulder, because remember, this is going to be used like for the beach. There's the inside here. There's your connector. Okay. And we have on the bottom, you've got the vinyl. It's a great bag for schlepping around, going to the beach, running around, going to the park with the kids, whatever. This is one of those kind of bags, and it's great, fun, first beginner project. You learned a lot about troubleshooting, you learned about construction, and this will be a fun bag to try. So give me some comments below. Let me know if you made this bag and how your story ended up, and how much fun you had and the things you discovered about making it. If you like this, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments before if you like this and if you want to progress to go to other bags and work our way up. I'll be happy to do that. I want to see how many people are interested in having me do it. So let me know, because we can go a lot further than this. This is just a beginner project. All right, everybody, take care. Talk to you soon, and have a great time at your sewing machine.